The image of the distressed female, most likely to linger in memory, is the image of one who did not die, the survivor, or the final girl. And also, I'm a cow. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, hi, my name is Zhariya Smith, and I typically make commentary videos just like this one. So, if you like that or me, you can subscribe down below, like always. Since it is spooky week, I do have my vampire blood candle burning, and as you can tell, me and Connor are doing a couple's costume. I am him, and he is me. But hi, so if you don't know anything about me and this is your first time seeing my face, I am obsessed with horror movies. Literally the first horror movie that I ever saw was It, the original, obviously. The first horror movie that I saw in theaters was Insidious 2, not Insidious 1 because I watched that at home. And I am just so fascinated with horror films, and I love horror films, and I actually took a class on horror films this semester, and I could go to length about the different subgenres, about everything dealing with horror films, because I love it so much. And recently, since it is spooky season, I decided to watch the new Halloween Kills movie. Great movie. The special effects were just a little much at times, but you know, who am I to say? It got me thinking about the final girl. I think the person who, you know, kind of made the final girl trope known, that identified it and gave it a name, was Carol J. Clover. She wrote a book called Her Body Himself, and also, you know, just talked about horror and then how horror likes to make women suffer. And as a woman who loves horror, it's always been really interesting to me to kind of like, you know, examine these things and kind of look deeper. Since I am a film minor student, I, you know, figured why not for Halloween, since, you know, my last videos have been a little, you know, much very TikTok-y. I want to get back to my roots. I want to get into the hard commentary of analyzing things. So let us examine the final girl. That was a really long intro. I'm very sorry. But if you do not know what the final girl is, if you've never watched a horror film, or maybe you're too scared to watch horror films, I get the vibe. There's pretty much a premise in a lot of slasher films specifically, where there will be a whole main cast, a whole vibe, but then by the end of the movie, whether some people may survive, no one may survive, but a common recurring theme amongst these movies is the final girl. And it's weird that it's the final girl and never a final boy, but I'll get into that later. And the final girl is basically the heroine that is left at the end of the horror film. Typically, she will have survived, well, obviously the whole time, defending herself off, watching her friends, you know, R.I.P. She defeats the bad guy, or she escapes, or, you know, lives on to tell another tale. And, you know, the final girl has a lot of traits that I think is interesting to talk about. If you've ever watched Cabin in the Woods, or The Cabin in the Woods, whatever. Cabin in the Woods, great film. Definitely a good starter horror movie to watch if you haven't watched one before. Kind of does like a meta commentary on this final girl trope, and they don't call her the final girl, they call her the virgin. And I'm going to get more into like the whole purity aspect in the next section of the video. But what you should know about the typical traits of a stereotypical final girl will be very white, blonde, proper, could have some, you know, weird family issues going on, but nothing too crazy. Is just focused on school, academics, being smart, not having a lot of substance to her, kind of being the prude of the friend group, and kind of, you know, not divulging into typical girly, fun, teeny things. I guess stereotypically, because, you know, if you're a teen, you're doing teen things. But she typically abstains from this, and she typically, if she has a boyfriend, is not doing things with him. They just kiss or hug, you know, nothing too crazy. She doesn't drink, she doesn't do drugs. She just simply is boring. I'm kidding, not boring, but you know, in terms of teens in movies, it's kind of like a 180 of what you see teens being depicted as. And I guess because she is not distracted by sex, drugs, and rock and roll, she is very, you know, conscious of things that are happening around her, a la Laurie Halloween, or one of my favorite final girls, Sydney Prescott, or if you like Scary Movie, Cindy. I could make a whole video on Anna Faris, guys. I love that movie, specifically Scary Movie 2, but Scary Movie, the original, chef's kiss. But yeah, that's the final girl described. I hate that this is a stereotype, that the final girl is, you know, this cookie cutter white girl doing her suburban life things, but that's the final girl. And I guess let's get into the next section. So since I have talked to you guys about what the final girl is, who she is, what she does, and all of those things, I kind of wanted to kind of do a little bit of a pivot slightly, still on the topic of the final girl, but I really wanted to kind of like zero in on the Christianity and purity aspect that is in all of horror, which could be its own video in itself, but specifically in these slasher films. I think that it's really interesting that we see almost all of the teens who aren't entirely pure almost get punished for, you know, doing things that aren't prim and proper. In The Cabin in the Woods, the lady, when she talks about the different tropes, she says the first person to die is always the whore. That felt weird coming out of my mouth. But she's just the first person to die. And I think it's interesting that the girl who embraces her sexuality and the girl who was almost the foil, the opposite of the final girl, gets killed first, and the girl who is pure lives at the end. You know, the foil. A good juxtaposition moment. Christianity and horror go hand in hand. Literally watch any Paranormal Activity, The Exorcist, Insidious, Sinister. Well, not really Sinister. Love Sinister, though. You should watch that for sure. We see that there is a common, you know, theme that God, the pastor, the priest that is, you know, down the block, he's going to save you. He's going to save you from all the paranormal things that are happening to you in terms of the paranormal space. But we don't really talk about how the Christian ideals of being extremely pure, loving your parents, you know, just the typical Christian godly things are encouraged and are kind of pushed in horror films. And the characters who don't do these things, R.I.P., you know, like they go down for the count. And the final girl is there to kind of witness and see almost how these characters are being punished. You know, it's really interesting. I will say I feel like every person has their scary movie. My scary movie is Scream. Oh my God. The obsession that I have with Scream is unhealthy. Ghostface, I'm gonna get a tattoo of him. Like, I love him so much. If you notice that typically the antagonist, the stabby guy, is typically a man. And we kind of see these various characters. My professor said that knives, typically when people in these films are getting stabbed brutally, like you don't really see like guns or anything like that. And there is this kind of parallel where it's like the killer is trying their very best to penetrate. I hate that word. I know it's a technical word, but I hate it. To do that to the main final girl, that he never actually achieves getting that. And I think that it's kind of like see what happens when you're pure? You don't get stabbed. And it's like, you can get stabbed anyways, you know. It's just it's just a funny thing to think about. So in Her Body Himself, gender and slasher film, Carol Clover writes that she is the one who encounters the mutilated bodies of her friends and perceives the full extent of the preceding horror and of her own peril. who is chased, cornered, wounded, whom she sees scream, stagger, fall, rise, and scream again. She is abject terror personified. If her friends knew they were about to die only seconds before the event, the final girl with the knowledge for long minutes or hour. She alone looks death in the face, but she alone also finds strength either to stay the killer long enough to be rescued or kill him herself. She is inevitably female, and I love a good female empowerment moment. As always, that's all I love to watch. If you ever watch Assassination Nation, watch that too. Very good film. But I do think that purity and Christianity and just that type of culture is very much pushed, and we even see in Scream, they say like, oh, the one rule to survive in a scary movie is to be a virgin, or the closest to a virgin you can be in terms of Cabin in the Woods. But it's just really funky to me, and I think it's really interesting, I guess. So next I want to talk about the lack of diversity in the survivor category of these films. Yes, I'm making it a race thing. What are you going to do to my channel? I don't care. Why isn't the final girl literally ever a person of color? I'm not even talking about black people this time. I'm talking about literally a person who is not white. With a, yeah, that was intentional. Why isn't that the case? We typically see in horror films that they take place in suburbia, or a bunch of suburban teens go on a trip like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where they stumble upon a house and they're like, oh, this is all funky and crazy. You know, I think that there is a thought process that black people don't belong or aren't common in suburbia, though I will say there are a lot of black suburbs folks. I know it's a shocker. The lighting changed kind of. I don't know what's going on. Either way, when we see a black person in horror films, and it's not even like an intentional thing that the directors do, but seeing them as an object, they are not relatable. And also when we even look into, if we look into black neighborhoods, the big bad guy isn't a random guy in a mask, it's a random guy in a uniform. Is that too political for this video? Sorry. But I will say that horror films, in a way, even when I watched Halloween Kills 2 weeks ago, a week ago, whatever it was, I noticed that that there's still, in 2021, were not a lot of black people in that film. We had the black girl who's a doctor and her husband who was a nurse that got murdered very quick and very like joke characters. Then we had the older black woman in an interracial relationship, forced to watch her white husband get stabbed multiple times. Is that a spoiler? I don't know. I don't really care either. But in these films, black people are seen as something that's spectacle, and I think it's because the majority of the population is white, and why would they relate to Jackie when they could relate to Bethany? I don't know. Is that weird? But either way, I want to get into the modern final girl, the girly who, God, I just love so much. My favorite horror film at the moment is Midsommar, which, yes, Midsommar does the final girl. It's in a different way though. Like, instead of, her surviving getting attempted to get murdered, she becomes the May Queen and is now in a Swedish cult who, we love that for her. It's a good for her film, and we love the good for her films. But I do think that Midsommar aside, when we see these modern final girls, they are more than just defending themselves. They are going in for the kill. They are ready to slash, dash, survive, get the bag, and leave. I don't know. But I just find it so interesting because it's like the modern final girl, like Ready or Not. God, that was such a good film. We see her, or even, we just see like the modern horror film ladies are really just kind of elevating the genre. It's just so much more than like like the damsel in distress that we see in films so often, like, oh, someone help her. It's like she's helping herself, and she's helping herself pretty well, you know. And I saw someone, I can't remember what article it was, but someone had said that it's more entertaining to see a woman get killed than a man get killed. And when women are killed, it's a lot more dramatic, and it's a lot more like violent, sexual, like it's so like exploitative. But whenever a man RIPs is one and none, he's gone, you know. And I think it's because there is such an fascination with the female body and feminine energy. And I think that when we see like Psycho, for instance, there is no final girl in Psycho, by the way, but I will say that when Marion, is that her name? I forget it. When she gets, you know, slashed in the shower, so violent, so just, oh my gosh, you know. And we see like a lot of nudity in horror films, and we see a lot of these fascination with the female body. And it's more than just horror films, but I do think it's interesting that when we talk about purity and we talk about all these things, it's like we see the virgin get brutally victimized, and she suffers. I think that we're going in a good direction. I think that, for instance, The Final Girl in Us, the mom, well, I would say it's the final family, but I feel like the story really does center around the mom. She survives. However, it's a plot twist because she is actually the one who was tethered, and the real mom, well, now she's dead, but the real mom was in the tethered place for all that time. And it was like, plot twist. Or like in Get Out, there was no final girl, there was final boy, aka Chris. And I think it's really interesting how like the genre is evolved, you know, as a whole. While it is really fun to, you know, watch the typical little slasher film every now and then, I do think that horror is evolving so much, and I'm honestly so excited to see where it goes. Yeah, I don't know, I guess that's my video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to give it a big thumbs up because it really, really helps small channels like mine. Make sure to also subscribe to me. I'm like 400 subscribers away from 5,000. So that's kind of cool. If you want to subscribe to me for that, you can do that. Subscribe for the bisexual lighting, or for Connor's amazing cosplay of me. I think it's uncanny, really. I think he's staging me up, to be honest. But yeah, so make sure to stay happy and stay healthy and stay safe, especially with your Halloween parties and trick-or-treating. Like, please don't get slashed and dashed, you know? I don't know why I keep on saying slash and dash. I'm obsessed with that word now, so I'll be using it forever. But yeah, I will catch you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.